Hi everyone, my name's Daren Dean. Anthony has invited me to come to speak to you through video today. Well, let me just jump right into it. First thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is writing from the subconscious versus the conscious mind, right? The intellect and the problems, right? I mean, we've all experienced, writing where it just seems like we're recording, we're dictating what's going on in our mind, right? And that's when we know we're writing from the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, right? It's something that the Greeks call ecstasis, right? Or ecstasy. We're in an ecstatic state, and if I remember right, that means to be in that state is to stand outside of oneself in the Greek, ecstasis. So this is kind of one of my writing obsessions lately. And I guess it's become an obsession because so often when I do have time to write, or I make myself sit down, it's time to write, I have problems, right? I have problems getting to that part of my mind, the subconscious part of my mind, to write my best. And so often you end up trying to write with your critical mind, and you can only do so much when it comes to making art. When it comes to writing, I think you can only do so much in that state of mind. So, let's see. How do we get to that state of mind? That's the question. And I can't say I have any or very many definitive answers about it, except that I've been reading a lot of different things. The psychiatrist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book called Flow. And he's essentially talking about, we all know what the flow is. It's sort of like in athletics, in sports, when you see a player who's in the zone, they're totally focused, they're functioning at a super high level, time seems to be distorted, they're totally engrossed in what they're doing, they're not checking Facebook, they're not worrying about if they look funny or not, right? And this can happen in sports, it can happen in writing too, right? That's the bottom line, that's what we're interested in. Now, another writer who's kind of building on what Csikszentmihalyi was talking about with flow is a guy named Stephen Kotler, and one of his more recent books is called Stealing Fire. And there's something he said in Stealing Fire that really grabbed my attention, because he was talking about how we're not very good at training people to be creative, right? And, in a creative writing class, that's what we think we're, ponying up our money for. They're going to teach me how to be creative. Or if you're more advanced, you might, as a writer, you might think they're going to teach me, finally, someone's really going to teach me how to edit, right? Or how to get published, right? But we don't want to get the cart before the horse in that sense, because we have to write something good and that's worth someone publishing first, right? So part of it is to become engrossed in your own writing process instead of thinking too much about publishing all the time, right? Because then you're not thinking about your story. You're thinking about the reward. It's sort of like this semester I'm teaching freshman comp, and from day one, so many of my students, what they're worried about is getting an A, right? But oftentimes they won't. They're not thinking about the actual work itself, or the kind of paper they're being asked to write, or doing the reading, or buying a book, textbook. They just, how am I going to get an A, right? And so it's sort of the same thing with writers who get too focused only on publishing, because first we've got to write a story. We've got to learn the craft and write the story. So what I was saying about Stealing Fire is he says we're not very good at teaching people to be creative. And he said, in his view, one reason for this is because we're trying to teach a skill instead of teaching a mindset, right? If you're in a mindset of being creative, that's where you want to live, rather than just simply, teach me this skill, how to be creative. I just do that every time, right? And it's going to work. Well, you've probably been writing long enough to know that it isn't that simple. And there's a lot of funny things writers do to try to get into that subconscious state of mind where they know they're going to write their best. And what works for Hemingway or some other writer, there was a story I read recently about the writer Greene, and to get into the writing state, he would go outside of where he lived and watch cars drive by and look at the license plates. And he would have to see some sort of configuration of letters and numbers or something. And somehow that would put him in that kind of trance-like state, right? Where he would write his best. I'm not sure exactly how that worked for him, but you can have a lucky charm, wear a certain pair of socks or certain hat. I remember that movie that Michael Douglas was in, and a bunch of other people, Wonder Boys, right? And his character, he was a professor, and he wore his wife's bathrobe every day to write. So you can see, something about these things makes people think I can enter into that subconscious state. And so you have to find out what's going to work for you, what's going to take you from this moment to that subconscious writing state where you can really produce something worthwhile, right? So I just find myself thinking about this quite a lot. And I feel like this is really the key. Because, most workshops, we do a little bit of writing, right? We discuss each other's work. We read essays or a book or something about a textbook written by a writer, and they'll do the craft talk, right? Here's setting, character, dialogue, etc., right? But the truth is, those things are great to read and know, but you want to know it. I love tennis, right? So, great players, if they were, every time they played a match, they're thinking about the mechanics of their forehand or their backhand or their serve. If they start thinking about it, then it's all going to go off. It's all going to go away. They're going to play terrible, right? But they're so experienced and such great athletes that, especially the top players, they're really playing. They're in flow. They're playing from their subconscious, right? You see Roger Federer win 20 Grand Slams, and Rafa Nadal's right behind him with 19 Grand Slam titles. These guys are playing from their subconscious minds, where they're playing at this phenomenal level, and they're not thinking about the mechanics of it. And it's the same thing with learning craft. I think writer's craft is, you want to learn it, absorb it, but I think, and I've tried it this way, but with some various levels of success. But if you start thinking to yourself, foreshadowing, in the scene, I'm going to try foreshadowing. Well, you can do it that way, but I guarantee you the best way is to put a character in a situation that's alive, and let the story develop, and you'll do foreshadowing, you'll do theme, you'll do these things organically, right? That's really what we want. So how do we get to that state? Well, that is a good question. Well, Robert Owen Butler has this book called From Where You Dream. It looks backwards when I hold it up here, so maybe it won't look backwards. I don't know. But anyway, it's a blue book. It's called From Where You Dream by Robert Owen Butler. I suggest that's a good one to read about this process. Of course, playing around with it. I mean, one way to think is start with your characters in a situation and just start daydreaming, right? Start letting the story develop sort of like a waking dream. Or, when you have these dreams right as you, right before you wake up, you're semi-conscious and you can control the dream, and that kind of state, I think, is what we're after. Well, if you want to try something with me, let's give this a shot. Take out a pen and a piece of paper, or if you have your laptop in front of you, open up a Word document. It doesn't matter how you do it. And this is something that I think is kind of interesting. I'm going to try it in my advanced creative writing class at Lincoln University this coming semester. And what I would like to have you do is just wherever you are, you can dim the lights, relax a little bit, close your eyes for a little bit, and what I want you to do is just think for a moment while I've got something that I'm going to read to you here, and I just want you to play along with me. This is from Narrative Design by Madison Smart Bell, and it's sort of like being hypnotized, right? No, I'm not going to hypnotize you to write better, but we're just going to try this little exercise, right? And they say with hypnotism that you can't be hypnotized against your will. Well, I'm not really hypnotizing you, but this kind of works in a way that kind of deepens that kind of trance state. John Gardner, he talked about this state of mind, right? And in his work about writers and writing and advice to young writers. And he says it should be like a dream, and you don't want the reader to wake up from it. Well, when you're in the process of writing your own story, you don't want to wake up from your own story, especially not too early and not before it's over, because it might be hard to get back to that state. So let's try this. This starts on page 12, and I just want you to see if you can put yourself in this state and really see what I'm talking about, okay? So close your eyes. Here it is. You're walking on a warm, grassy hillside. Really try to see this. Spangled with yellow sunlight. Tall grass is stroking at your ankles. It makes a whisking sound as you walk through it. The sun is very warm on your back. You begin to sweat a little, though you are still quite comfortable. Feel a warm trickle of sweat down your back. A field is full of red and yellow flowers, and all the flowers are swarming with bees. And as you pass, you hear the buzzing of the bees, a growing, rising hum. You smell the flowers as you pass, sweet, dusty aroma of pollen. At the foot of the hill, there's a lake, clear blue water and dark at the center. You're very warm. You're quite hot. You take off your clothes and go in to swim. The water is cool on your face as you break the surface, cool in the cups of your hand while you're swimming. Your strokes are strong but completely relaxed. You're swimming alongside a granite wall in the shadow of the rock, and near you a shaft of sunlight strikes a lily pad where dragonflies are hovering. At the center of the lake, you dive. The water changes color as you go down, dark blue, purple, blending into black. You hear only water rushing past your ears, in silence. And you're going deeper now. Now you're climbing out into the flat rocks by the shore. Dip your cupped hand in for a drink of water. It's cold and fresh to your taste. You let what's left run out between your fingers back into the lake. You stretch out on the warm, flat rock and let the sun's warmth dry you slowly. When you close your eyes, your eyelids are stained a deep, warm red with the sunlight and the heat. You drift, you dream, you're going deeper now. So this is something called an induction narrative, right? So you're just trying to get to that subconscious state of mind where your dreams are and where the best stories are going to come out of you. So that's all I have for you today. Give this a shot. See if you can consciously think more about writing from your subconscious. And the other trick is, if you get stuck with your story and your characters, think about what the characters yearn for, what they desire. And usually, especially in literary fiction, that's the thing that's missing. One thing genre writers do very well is they usually don't forget the stories about someone that wants something, right? And so if you find your story is having some issues, think, what does this person want, right? How do you think about something? Think of the times in your own life when you've yearned for something, for someone, right? How did you think? If you can infuse that into your story, into your characters, you're going to have a much more compelling story that the reader is going to care about, not just you as a writer expressing yourself, right? Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks again for listening, and good luck.